Hello, Seldon Law. Today is Wednesday. Um, no, actually, I'm sorry. Today's Tuesday, November 26th. We're one day away from, actually, 2 days away from
Yeah, couple.
Thanksgiving. I'm rushing myself here to Thanksgiving. Must be because I'm hungry. It's almost
Maybe.
lunchtime.
Same.
So, welcome back to Celadon Law Podcast. We're very happy to be back today. I have a very special guest with us today. We have attorney Tim Caron, if I pronounce it correctly.
Oh, yeah.
I
Yeah,
did.
yeah, yeah, yeah. My family, like we've joked about, just because it's French originally,
Oh,
maybe being like Caron or something like that. But at least when we've mentioned it in Quebec,
yeah.
where the family's from, they just say Karen. So
Oh, okay.
yeah.
So your family originally from Quebec? Most of your
Yeah,
family?
majority of it. So let's see. Yeah, I'm about like three quarters. So
Good, good.
yeah, big part of the because like I guess to jump ahead in terms of immigration, both sides of my family relatively recent immigrants, the great grandparents. So basically, three quarters of those came up from Quebec
Oh,
through, I think through the mainland,
okay.
not to Ellis Island, but
Yeah.
across the border down,
Wow.
and then the rest being through my mom's. So maternal great two of my maternal great grandparents Lebanese. So through Lebanon, more the traditional
Wow.
crossing the Atlantic.
It's a great mix, huh?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Do you speak French yourself?
Yeah, I did, a little bit. So I was very lucky. I got to study abroad when I was in college, so that kind of jump started it getting to because I was a history nerd and did Latin in high school for language, but actually being in that environment and because of the family connections,
Yes.
yeah. So it's for me, it's more just using the language app and sometimes doing the little 30, 40 quick
Yeah.
lessons to feel like that's enough. But
That's awesome. That's awesome. So yeah, we glad to have you here with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Attorney Tim. He's one of the attorneys here at Celadon Law, immigration law attorney. So yeah, so I want to give you the opportunity to tell the viewers a little bit about yourself, how you became an attorney, and why immigration law as well.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, so for me, I guess I would say, with my interest in law, it definitely went back a while. I think, uh, absolutely, from what I remember in high school, maybe even back to middle school, the idea of being a lawyer appealed to me for, I guess I'd say, a variety of reasons. I don't know if at a young age there was kind of I don't know, the excitement or the present, the excitement of the litigation element, the
Yeah.
cliche in pop culture you see again with being in the fancy courtroom and making the grand
Yeah.
speeches and stuff. And I think, yeah, as I got into high school and I found I was really into things like kind of like debating research,
Mm-hmm.
and I got into to doing. I like to do a lot of performing arts stuff, so like theater. So I think that once I found I was really into that presentational element, even more so looking at litigation, I'm like, oh, well, that seems like more comfortable for me, lines
Yes.
up with something I am into. So yeah, so I think, yeah, there was a lot of interest here and there for a while growing up, and nothing dissuaded me from that by the time I was in undergrad, and then ended up going to law school. For immigration, I think that it was a sort of I didn't have the traditional path of, I think a lot of lawyers have the standard path of, oh, the field I'm in, I took a particular course in law school and it really spoke to me, and then I kept
Right.
doing whatever electives I could, and I just kept being fascinated by it.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it was more, I think, it was kind of on the periphery for me when I did networking with a lot of different types of lawyers. It was an area that caught my attention and was one of kind of many I was looking at. I think for me, just because I've also always very much been into, like, I went to DC for undergrad, so
Okay.
kind of politics and foreign affairs are like the big things people like to talk about there. So for me, I was like, I've always been into foreign affairs, and I think meeting people from other countries is always fascinating, and getting that real perspective on other cultures. So I think that element, as well as, so I started working as an immigration lawyer about 5 years ago, and in that job, I think a big part of it, especially my first position, was doing initial intakes with clients,
Mm-hmm.
and that there was an element of them telling their story of why they came here,
Yes.
particularly with the asylum claims. And I think for me, as someone with the interest before in law and foreign cultures, and then with the art stuff, because that's storytelling, I think for me to see that there is this way to tell a truthful story in a way that is in support of someone who needs that help. Just it all really married well, really together, and yeah, here I am.
It's amazing. Thank you for sharing that with us,
Yeah, of course.
Tim. Uh, and which areas are you more focused on here at the firm right now?
I would say at this point, principally, defensive asylum work has been the most consistent over the last about year and a half that I've been here. And then on the side, I've been assisting with kind of finalizing materials for immigrant seeking applications for benefits before USCIS. So, for instance, what are called medical deferral actions. I was previously doing more work with the what are called RFEs, requests
Yes.
for evidence for USCIS applications. So, yeah, sort of a hodgepodge, I guess, of things.
Yeah, I'm fascinated how our law firm, we pretty much take on every type of case in immigration, and I see all the attorneys here always involved in different areas as well, not just focusing on one. It's great that we do that. With the asylum, with the changes now that it's coming up in in January, I know we've been getting a lot of calls from clients, especially from clients and non-clients, people that they haven't started their process yet. With the adjusting their status here in the U.S. People are frightened. People are scared with the changes that can come, and that's something that we're going to talk about today. I wanted to ask you, focus on immigration during the presidential campaign. So if you could fill us in about that, anything you'd like to.
Certainly. So in my opinion, I guess not even in a professional context, but also as a more, I guess, more casual observer, even just talking with my friends from the DC area, where again we all studied poli-sci.
Yes.
It seemed to me that the two issue areas that really came into focus during the campaign, and I think made a difference in terms of the ultimate outcome, seemed to be first the economy, and then immigration. And justified or not, there was this focus on especially from the Trump side of look at all these troubles that are being reported across the country as a result of these too generous policies towards non-nationals who are coming into our country. Clearly something has to be done about it. If you look at my past term, I was the one making the necessary hard choices, and we saw good results. And under Biden, that's been reversed, and so therefore you put me back, and we'll be back on the right track. And I think even with the Harris campaign, I do think that there was a willingness, I think, in an effort to get more centrist, non-decided people to be a bit harsher, to take a firmer stance in terms of language, as well about immigration, not to the same level as Trump, but to I think she was, again, justified or not, going more center on that, and like I was saying, I do believe that it was one of the two main things that motivated people's vote, and put us where we are now with the re-election and the return on in January.
Right. So the campaign surely was very focused on immigration. What do you think would be expected focus at the start of Trump's term coming up in January? Because I see that he made a lot of promises, and it seems like some very, how Trump is, he makes those ridiculous promises all the time. But some of them that, it seems impossible, like the mass deportation, like he wants to deport millions of people. It seems like in 4 years, it seems impossible, especially how the economy is based around on immigration, on illegal immigrants too. The laborers, all the jobs that usually the illegal immigrants do. That they're out there, and making those changes is going to be, I would say, impossible. But what's the expected focus at the start of the term?
And I suppose this would be informed by a few different things. First being, what we saw him do in the first term, and which he hasn't disavowed. Second would be there. It appears, at least from a source I found, I believe it was CNN, there are some insiders who have given some word to media about what we can expect with from the get-go day one policies. And then I guess I would say also maybe as other sources that we can go off of. I guess just maybe guesswork from the rest of the kind of context of where we are now.
Yes.
So I would say, from what I understand, in terms of at least what inside sources have been reporting recently, it seems like the priority is going to be, in a general sense, I think much like the sort of Trumpian approach with Obama policies when he first assumed office in 2017. It seems like the priority will be in part to go after policies that Biden implemented, in the time during his term, between the two Trump terms, related to immigration, so that Trump will make efforts to remove, strike back, reverse whatever policies the Biden administration put in place with regards to immigration,
Right.
especially those that were put in response to whatever Trump had done first.
Mm-hmm.
It does seem there is some word that with regards to, as you were saying, the mass deportation. While we can't speak as to, I think, the sheer scope of it, it does seem like there will be at least steps taken in the initial days towards some heightened level of deportation,
Right.
unfortunately, as well as mass detention to help facilitate
Yes.
whatever operations do end up happening.
Right.
So that's and additionally, it does seem that there's a some level of plans to implement stricter border measures, and
Yes.
at least that language seems to imply that could entail
Mm-hmm.
maybe a few different new policies put in place. For instance, there's word, or at least that Trump has suggested that there was a phone app put in place by the Biden administration, I believe CBP One,
Yes.
that Trump is, insisting that will be one of the things that will be taken away, related to, again, border enforcement measures.
Right. Right. He's I can see that he's going to be focusing a lot on the border. With Mexico, especially with Mexico, having the more strict rules, I guess, right? And also the building a wall.
Yep.
That's what he always brings out during his campaign. And that's one of the things about the executive orders. If you could explain the viewers what exactly is and what the plan is for Trump.
So admittedly, it's been some years since getting my poli-sci degree and learning constitutional law at school.
Yes.
But as I understand it, executive orders are this kind of perceived authority that the president's carved out for themselves, where they can issue an official statement saying, by my power as executive of the United States, I'm going to issue an order that such and such policy be implemented, and there might potentially be some room to challenge that, like if members of Congress say, oh well, the Constitution or these regulations say we only have power to do what you just ordered. There is still today, there is still recognition to an extent of the president's, when they do assert these orders by their sheer executive authority, there is some level of respecting that.
Yes.
And so it's expected that Trump will, as he did in the previous term, that he will be trying again to use these executive orders to say again that by my sheer power as your elected president, I hereby, put this order in place pursuant to immigration
Right.
matters. So, for instance, it appears that from the insider sources that one executive order that's being considered would make detention mandatory in the case of detained individuals who are unlawfully present in the U.S.
Okay. So you think it's going to be an increase of growth of more detainees,
Yeah.
people that are here illegally, being sent to detention.
Yeah, unfortunately so, and I think because at least at least for the time being and during the campaign, the Trump team has stressed, oh, our priority is these, we like people who are lawfully here and contributing to the country and doing
Right.
it the right way, but we have to do something about these individuals who are doing it, unlawfully. So it does seem at least that the plan is to focus at least initially on these individuals who are unlawfully here. And while I'm not sure as to in a practical sense, as you were alluding to, the actual capabilities of holding so many more people
Right.
so soon, or also the potential legal challenges that he's going to
Yes.
face. I think there will unfortunately still be efforts made, I think, to accomplish it as much as possible
Yes.
early on.
I think, Tim, I think probably because right now, as we know, the detention centers they filled up.
Yep.
They already at capacity. You think the removal process is going to be much faster with Trump?
Yeah, that's difficult to say. I suppose it would depend on. I mean, perhaps in some it might depend on some jurisdictions.
Right.
With I don't know what to say, if because part of what some people credited in with the first Trump term in terms of big impact was the sheer level of federal judges that were appointed to courts across the whole of the country. So there is the possibility again, depending on if he tries to introduce, I don't know, new laws or orders related to the removal process, trying to expedite it.
Yes.
There is a chance that he could introduce something, or legislators, working in tandem with him, introduce something, in that even if they're legally challenged, that perhaps
Yes.
they could fall before courts that unfortunately are, or judges that are sympathetic or have the kind of ideological mindset where they'll be eager to keep
Yes.
these removal proceedings expedited fast. I mean, it is certainly true that there is a backlog across the country in terms of these cases, but there's, I think, a lot of discussion still left to be had about what is the
Yes.
the most just way to deal with the backlog without compromising the process for all these individuals in their cases.
And a lot of the people don't understand. I don't want to say pro-Trump supporters that everyone has a right to go in front of a judge. So it has to go through due process. It doesn't. It's not that Trump will say, "I want everyone at these detention centers to be deported by tomorrow." Everyone has a right to be in front of the judge, immigration judge, in order for that to happen and have a chance of having an attorney, a chance to have legal defense, an attorney, immigration attorney to assist them. And let's talk about DACA. Regarding DACA, what's your expectation on that?
Well, so where we stand currently is, it appears, speaking of federal judges who are aligned with the Trump team's approach. So DACA is technically still in place. It has been since it was first established under Obama, and despite the fact that Trump attempted to end it during the first term, but was blocked in doing so by the Supreme Court. And while Biden himself issued regulations to preserve DACA, unfortunately, in September of last year, there was a district court ruling in Texas which found that DACA was unlawful, and despite the fact that it is a district level court rather than the Supreme Court, the policy then is essentially that there's a sort of pending status, a sort of limbo while the case is still has the potential to be heard up even by the Supreme Court. So where as things stand now is that under the pending court rulings, DHS can accept, for instance, first-time DACA requests, but those requests can't processed, for the time being, given the court situation.
Yeah.
Trump himself has signaled that he is going to, make a renewed effort to end DACA protections. And the concern seems to be with legal experts that if, for instance, that pending court action does, for instance, go up to the Supreme Court and the court finds that the program is unlawful, that the Trump administration, since that's an outcome they would be very eager to have, that they would have no reason to make any further efforts to combat, the decision, or to, for instance, amend DACA to fit under whatever court rulings there might be in the future to keep it legal. And the concern with experts is that should that happen, that the program end one way or another, that it could result in up to 500,000 recipients losing their protected status that they have received under the DACA program.
Yes, unfortunately, there's a lot of people under that program right now. It's sad that would go away because it does benefit a lot of.
And I think too, given that it was supposed to be for the benefit of individuals who came to the country when they were children, so the whole idea being that they didn't, have the, I guess, necessarily the agency or the mindset to commit, with the criminal intent to come into the countries.
Yeah, they didn't have the choice.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah. Let's talk about change to policy charge. Change to public charge policy.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So, I guess as a means of introduction, because this is a term I wasn't familiar with till I started practicing in immigration law, a consideration the government will make for an individual if they're seeking immigration benefits is whether they are considered to be what's called a public charge, which essentially means a public charge being someone who is seen as, quote unquote, primarily dependent on the government for subsistence, demonstrated, for instance, by receiving a public cash assistance for income maintenance or some kind of lawn care support at the government expense. And so that had already been in place prior to the Trump term. However, during his first term, he did take efforts to, through regulations, broaden the scope of programs that be considered when an individual is considered for, are they too much of a burden to programs the government offers. Trump introduced regulations broadening what programs to consider in that determination. So, for instance, using non-cash assistance programs like Medicaid and Children's Health Insurance Program. So the expectation is that while the Biden administration rescinded those changes, that Trump his team will make efforts to reinstate those changes. And based upon there were some studies looking at the impact of those changes during the first term. There was reports of I see there was a survey suggesting that even as late as 2023, there was uncertainty among a majority of adult immigrants in terms of what the public charge rules actually entail. And it seems that that sense of confusion and apprehension resulted in more avoidance of applying in the first place for assistance with regards to things like food or housing or healthcare, just sheerly out of the sense of, well, is this going to make me a public charge and in the long run do more harm than the good it's doing me now? So I think the one of the immediate fears, if it's reinstated, that sheer scope is I guess regardless of the question of whether or not someone's case or circumstances makes them a public charge, is them having too much fear or potential misinformation in the first place that will prevent them from even seeking programs that they are arguably entitled to and wouldn't render them public charge. So it will likely feed into an already lingering atmosphere of anxiety and confusion from the first term about seeking assistance that they're potentially eligible for under U.S. law.
That would be very unfortunate, because as we know, we have many clients that especially children, that does need medical assistance. So let's talk about expanding interior enforcement actions using increased resources for ICE.
Hmm. So it seems like the incoming administration is looking to go broadly in terms of both sort of as they see it, defense at the border, the initial defense at the border, the literal wall and other means of keeping people out, and then also enforcement actions in the country, like what we were alluding to before, for instance, with mass detentions and deportations. And the administration has signaled on one hand in terms of, I guess in my personal opinion, I see the wall as being it's more symbolism. I seen, at least me, I've read studies indicating the actual effectiveness of a newer, fancier wall in preventing more crossing seems questionable.
Yeah.
But regardless, I think at the very least, again, to show that big, fancy symbol, it does appear that there will be some effort to keep going with funding and rebuilding a wall. Additionally, we will likely be looking at more harsher enforcement or more officers present at official ports of entry that have been designated for people seeking asylum. Trump has signaled, and this I think is another area which could lead to big legal complications. He's signaled, I will declare a national emergency based on my understanding of the sheer scope of this problem. And using that status, I will not only use military to help carry out the deportations and the detention, but I will also use. There's concern that if Congress does not go along with it and give more funding to assist, that there will be efforts to use the national emergency declaration to then unlock resources through the Pentagon. So yeah, really tapping into the military component to say, hey, we have something going on in the country that necessitates military involvement. So therefore, all these resources tied to the military, we should have access to that in order to accomplish the necessary detentions, deportations.
Right.
And I think the fear being, for instance, of course, that if these renewed efforts happen, I think especially thinking back to what happened during the first term and even for instance, the ongoing situation with the children who were separated from their families at the border, that whole debacle, there's the concern that the policies I've just mentioned will lead to more family separations, the detentions themselves, and that we're talking, severe implications for the mental health and well-being of a considerable number of people who are residing in this country, lawfully or unlawfully.
Yeah. So, that brings us to another topic about mass deportation. How could negatively impact the U.S. workforce and economy as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess my first thought is I at the very least have hope that Trump's team is mindful of these statistics we're now about to go into. My hope is that they are cognizant of that, and that even if they are projecting this sort of, the deportations are for the good of the country. The economy will be great as a result. Everything will be better as a result. I hope they are mindful of these statistics and making calculations based on that, because there is indication through research to suggest that that immigrants, both lawfully and unlawfully present in the U.S., have a very big positive impact on the workforce and our economy in this country, and so therefore any major action could have a drastic, certainly in the short term and I think the midterm, if not the long term as well, impact. So, for instance, there's research showing that immigrants do not, in fact, replace U.S.-born workers at a noticeable rate or as a phenomenon. There's indications they help foster job growth through their own entrepreneurship and consumption of goods and services in this country. Federal data indicated that unemployment rates for U.S.-born workers did not increase between 2022 and 2023, and it's remained similar to those for immigrant workers. Immigrants also do pay in this country what's reported to be billions of dollars in federal, state, and local taxes. And so given all that contribution to to our country and the economy. There's concerns that have been raised that mass deportation would at the very least lead to workforce shortages in key sectors which rely on a lot of immigrant workers. So, for instance, we're talking agriculture, construction, healthcare, and that as a result of those workforce shortages, we would then see negative economic consequences like this feels a bit, I guess, ironic given the concern over grocery store prices that really made it in the news at the end of the campaign, but this could lead to, for instance, an increase in the cost of essential goods such as groceries. There is a concern also that mass deportation could worsen housing shortages since immigrants make up a significant share of construction workers. There's been talk of a renewed focus on workplace raids, and there's a resulting concern that such raids could exacerbate existing labor shortages and having negative impact on local economies for communities where such labor is being performed.
Correct. And, one of the big concerns, I see a lot of immigration attorneys talk on podcasts or YouTube. It's about the ending birthright citizenship that Trump has been promising.
I think so. I mean, I am perhaps naively optimistic that because it is seen as or it is explicitly recognized under the U.S. Constitution that should Trump go ahead, and he's claimed he would do an executive order, that should Trump go ahead and do that there would be an immediate, and my hope would be decently strong, a decently strong argument to be made against how that is clearly unconstitutional and, absent an amendment literally made by Congress, wouldn't be warranted, wouldn't be permissible. However, I guess a caveat there would be, say, for instance, he does institute or issue the executive order and there is immediate legal resistance and we see on the lower courts, agreement that, this is clearly unconstitutional. I suppose the concern would be, given the clear majority now in the Supreme Court, that perhaps there would be an avenue to rule in his favor ultimately. Although I think it's far too early to speculate on exactly how the court would fall. It would really depend on the particulars of whatever case might be brought before the Supreme Court. Should even for a temporary time that order be recognized and there be a suspension at least in recognition of birthright citizenship, experts worry that would limit an access to healthcare coverage for children of immigrants if they don't have lawful status. It could have broader consequences for, as I was alluding to earlier, workforce and the economy. Where there's federal data which suggests or shows that adult children of immigrants have, in fact, slightly better educational and economic outcomes than adult children of U.S.-born parents, and they make up twice the share of physicians, surgeons, and other healthcare practitioners. Other research shows that children of immigrants contribute more in taxes on average than their parents or the rest of the U.S.-born population, that the fiscal contributions exceed their costs associated with healthcare, education, and other social services. This data reminds me sort of the often cited statistics suggesting, for instance, again, that immigrants and their children, are more law-abiding technically than the children of those who are, already themselves citizens in the United States. Thankfully, again, as I was saying, it would, if that order falls into place, it would again, because specifically the amendment, it's the 14th Amendment that permits birthright citizenship. So any effort to subvert that would need to have, again, a permissible constitutional reinterpretation of that amendment. So there will be heavy, no matter how far it actually gets on a practical level, there will be intense legal battle. While I think there is indications that there will be a strong defense there, it unfortunately remains to be seen a bit in terms of how how far an executive order could actually get in terms of being implemented, and again, how the federal courts would ultimately rule on what
Yes.
Trump might pull.
Yeah, it seems like it probably will be one of his biggest challenge in
Yeah.
all of the promises he had made. And about the restating the remaining Mexico,
Mhm.
I don't know what's happening to me today,
Yeah.
but
No.
I've been mixing words a little bit.
Yeah.
But the remaining Mexico policy,
Yeah.
that was one of the things that he's mentioned. If you could talk about that as well.
Certainly, and this one's a bit messy in terms of its title because that is what I knew it as well, but it is technically known as the Migrant Protection Protocols, but everyone for short, and I'll, as such refer to it as Remain in Mexico here. So that was a policy that he had implemented in his initial term, which required that people who are seeking asylum in the United States would be required, while awaiting for their immigration court proceedings to commence, that they would be required to remain within the borders of Mexico, even if those circumstances led them to be living in unsafe conditions during the time that they'd be in Mexico. It's a policy that the Biden team ended in 2022 after some legal debate. Although a caveat here is I would say that Biden, similar to Kamala's approach during the presidential campaign, we have seen in 2023 and 2024 more restrictive limits on asylum eligibility, passed largely in response to the higher number of border encounters under the Biden term. So, despite these restrictive limits, Trump still feels compelled to bring back the Remain in Mexico policy, and in accompanying that is there are the suggestions again that we might see, as I was alluding to before, an increased military presence along the border. I think to ensure that individuals like those who might be subject to Remain in Mexico policy, again, are not entering the country. So unfortunately, at least in my opinion, I do think I don't see why he won't hold back in reinstating this policy. Right. And at least my belief would be, unless we get a clear court decision, ruling against the permissibility of the policy, I do think we will see it back in some form.
So people that they want to seek asylum going through the border, what Trump wants them is to stay in Mexico while they seek asylum.
Because to me it seems, I think the logic being, while their intended destination is the United States, given the supposed chaos in the U.S. because of the asylum seekers, as well as the fact that these asylum seekers are also traveling through Mexico on the way to the U.S., I think there's the belief of, Mexico has just as much of a responsibility to I guess in a vague sense, look after these people while they're trying to get asylum. So it's only fair that because they went through Mexico and we have to look out for our country and our resources, it's only fair that Mexico have them stay up there in the north,
right,
just across the border before proceedings actually start in immigration court.
Right. And that leads me to another question regarding to restrictions on humanitarian protections under the Trump administration. With refugees, do you believe there's going to be any changes on that as well?
I do believe and I think this will betray a bit more of my bias in that I myself believe in the positive benefit of these policies of humanitarian protection and what this country has to offer. So I think I do unfortunately believe that, like with Remain in Mexico, that we will see. I wouldn't be surprised if we see. So Trump in his first term set annual refugee admission numbers, like a sort of ceiling for the max number that could be admitted per year. The stats indicate that during his first year, he brought that number down to 50,000, 2017, and then by 2020, it was only 18,000. Biden brought that number back up to 65,000 in 2021, which was roughly at the numbers they were before Trump came into office. and those numbers were increased especially in 2022, 2024, in response to concerns such as, I believe, the war in Ukraine and Afghanistan. And so, yes, unfortunately, I think it's likely Trump's going to reduce the ceiling back down for the max number. More particularly, he's likely going to try and roll back the initiatives related, for instance, to what's called temporary protected status, or TPS,
Yes.
which allows individuals from particular countries to come to the U.S. legally if they meet certain conditions because of a determination on our country's part that their home countries are not safe. And TPS allows them. It's a compromise where they are given a way to get employment authorization, but not a pathway to long-term residency or citizenship. So, for instance, under Biden, we've seen up to 30,000 migrants per month, roughly, from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. I think it is unfortunately expected that at least some of those programs would be targeted. And concern among experts is that if there is a removal of TPS as an option, that will put considerable number of people at risk for deportation, which in turn contributes to separating families, which will have, as I've alluded to before, negative impacts on mental health, physical health, broader consequences for our country's workforce and the economy. Kind of in tandem in that, we're seeing that Trump will likely attempt to, I would think, like the infamous travel ban from early on in the first term, that we'll see attempts at entry restrictions based on nationality or ideological grounds being introduced. Among experts, similarly, there are concerns that if there are attempts to put annual limits or quotas from individuals from certain countries, there's concerns that we will then see even more extensive delays on top of the backlog we already have in our immigration system. Concerningly, I've seen some language where Trump has promised to, or suggested that he's going to expand travel bans aimed at a broader list of countries than before, and introduce this ideological screening to individuals he categorizes as dangerous lunatics, haters, bigots, and maniacs. I at least maybe from my background as being very much into, again, like foreign affairs and constitutional law, I would be myself deeply concerned if we do see renewed efforts with those bans, just because I think particularly the ideological screening, I think it would be a sort of blight on this country if we end up in a position where, say, we still have these disasters in areas like, again, for instance, Ukraine or the Levant, the Middle East, and to think that we might have a policy where we're saying, oh, well, because your ideology might not be in tandem with what the administration sees as the American mindset, therefore we can't take a risk on you coming here, which I just think is just really, I don't know, just runs counter to be cliche what's made this country great and really solidified, I don't know, the decades of immigration, in the 1800s into the 1900s that really solidified this country.
Right. The team. Let's talk about the team that's behind the policy. I know there's a lot of changes that's coming up, especially with the agenda that the people that he's been picking to run with Trump, the White House.
Yeah, so we have names for three individuals that it looks like, unless for some reason they opt out, will be a part of the equation. First is an individual who admittedly I didn't have much context for until his name was brought up, I believe a week or two ago, a man by the name of Tom Homan, who previously was the director of ICE during the first Trump administration. And in fact, he first really got his experience under Obama because he did hold a senior role at ICE during the Obama administration, and during the time when the Obama administration, justified or not, itself was going hard on deportations. So he's been this man, Tom Homan has been flagged as that he's going to be named as maybe appropriately enough given how much this term was thrown around in the campaign against Kamala allegedly being designated this that he will be border czar, and that he's seen as being kind of the man behind or the person behind if we do see this mass deportation effort early on, that he will be, perhaps the man behind it. He's given statements indicating that in his belief, it's possible to carry out mass deportations without separating families, but that will be because it'll be deporting an entire family unit together, even if a child may be a U.S. citizen, which seems like it could be very egregious in a legal sense. He used an expression suggesting that the handcuffs will be taken off of ICE with this coming administration. He signaled a willingness, like with the first term, to carry out workplace raids as part of mass deportation efforts. He's stressed that these operations will be targeted and focused on public safety and national security threats. So, we'll see if these efforts begin, how true that is. So he's the first name. The next, which was, I believe, the first one to fall into place after the election win was confirmed, was South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem. She has been apparently been tapped to serve as head of DHS for the campaign or for the President-elect Trump. I myself, after I saw that she was selected, tried to do some research on my own about what stances she's had or policies she's implemented before on immigration. I wouldn't say there's a ton, but there has been. I believe she did contribute or attempted to contribute some resources or personnel to the border. I believe, if not during the first Trump term, perhaps in support of Texas during when they were fighting with Biden during the present term. Admittedly, I try and be with her. I'm trying to be professional in that. I sure, as some people might remember, she got into a snafu during her attempt to run for president or some other position when the anecdote came out about her effectively executing a young dog for not being a well-trained enough hunting dog. So I try not to let that color my opinion of her, but I do, at least again based on the what I was mentioning before about her supporting with resources at the southern border before, and also her support for Trump, gives me, I do have trepidation about what policies she'll try and implement as head of DHS.
Right.
And then last is the sort of, I feel like the most, from the first term, kind of the most, at least among my group of friends in law and into politics, the stereotypical boogeyman for Trump immigration policy, Stephen Miller, who will likely be serving as Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy, as well as serving as in a vague sense, Homeland Security Advisor. He's spoken of plans that include large staging facilities near the border in order to help facilitate these mass detention and deportation efforts. He also has spoken about a renewal of worksite raids. So he's the third, sort of, if we go by rule of three, he's the third person to look out for or to pay attention to. Some other names that have been mentioned for people who may be involved with plans include ex-U.S. Border Patrol Chief Rodney Scott, as well as a special advisor to Texas Governor Greg Abbott on the border, a man named Michael Banks. Those two names were provided, I believe, to CNN from a couple sources. So, we'll see if they're actually if they actually factor into the equation. But yes, though so far those 5 individuals are the big ones right now in terms of the team that's falling into place for Trump.
Right. And I see that, just to finalize, I know we only have a few minutes left. One of the biggest things is the business side.
Yeah.
Work visa, H-1Bs. What's your input on that?
I think in a general sense, and with, again, a caveat of, for me at least, that my expertise falls more on the side of defensive immigration, asylum immigration, it does seem like experts as well as firms that specialize more in employment law are immigration, business immigration, are some at least believe that we're not going to see an immediate impact, as it seems the early signs are that the heavy focus will be on potential deportations and detention. However, based on what happened in the first term, it is expected that we're going to see more scrutiny from USCIS in terms of applications that are submitted to them.
Yes.
For instance, it'll be more likely that applicants are going to get RFEs requesting further evidence to back up, how they say, oh, I qualify for this benefit. We're probably going to see more site visits by USCIS to verify that what is, being said by the applicant in their application is correct with regards to for instance, significant others or where they're working. There is some concern that the H4 category for work permits may be targeted. Specifically, that is work permits for spouses of H-1B visa holders. So, although again, this is at this point speculative.
Right.
In terms of international students who are coming to the U.S., there is some concern that there may be efforts to limit access to what are called OPT visas for those individuals. Again, speculative. In general, there is I think in general there's also a concern that in addition to more requests for evidence, that we may see more delays in terms of processing for immigration benefits involving a working position in the U.S. that we may see more intense labor market testing on the part of the government to, make absolutely sure that in their minds that a foreign worker is not replacing a just as capable U.S. worker with a respective position.
Right.
And then finally, tying back to the travel bans alluded to before, we did see in the first term that ban meant that individuals from certain countries couldn't apply for employment-based immigration visas as well. So a list I have here, for instance, for the first term included Chad, Eritrea, Iran, Iraq, Kyrgyzstan, Libya, Myanmar, Nigeria, North Korea, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, Tanzania, Venezuela, and Yemen all factored in. So, we could very well see either essentially the same list, if not more locations, or perhaps a smaller number, but likely some number of countries will see a block in terms of their eligibility for employment-based visas. And so, kind of as a final general note for the business immigration side, the consensus among experts and firms seems to be that employers are strongly encouraged to file extensions wherever possible at the earliest possible opportunity, and again to factor in now that we're going to probably see longer processing times with USCIS for a lot of these options they may pursue for potential employees.
Correct. Yeah. So there's a lot of speculations that there will be a lot of changes. One of the changes I hear that they're looking to increase the wages too, to make it a little bit, not a little, but a lot harder for to employ them. But we'll see. What the changes will be eventually, if there will be any changes at all the next 4 years.
Yeah.
So any final words, Attorney Tim, that you'd like to share with the viewers? One of the fears that a lot of the from the immigrants that seeking adjustment of status in the U.S. Is a lot of those people that they have deportation order removals, that they I see a lot of people with criminal records. They're here legally. I have noticed a lot of calls coming in, people with criminal court dates, that once they get to the due to criminal court date, they getting sent to detention centers right away. Is that something that's gonna? What would you tell the viewers in regards to that?
I mean, I think there is certainly some reason to be concerned about an increased number of, or an increased effort to detain individuals and keep them detained. However, fortunately, there is still the means, for instance, with detained individuals with removal proceedings. There is the means, for instance, to request what are called bond redetermination hearings to ask the immigration judge to post a bond given the circumstances for the particular individual. So, for instance, if they can demonstrate, even if there was some criminal record, that it doesn't entail any major crime.
Right.
So, for instance, the judges want to see that in terms of allowing these individuals to be released on bond, the judges want to see that they're not seen as a risk to other individuals in the local communities, that they're not a flight risk if they're allowed to be released, that they're then just not going to attend their immigration proceedings. So I think, as long as individuals are able to get letters of support from family and friends showing that they're involved in their local community, that they're good people, that there will, still be, for the foreseeable future, those avenues for them to still be able to get out of detention if they do have removal proceedings. I guess I would say, in terms of more general final words, and a caveat to consider as, we anticipate the beginning of this next Trump term, a stat I saw was that, according to the Migration Policy Institute, Trump in the first term deported more than 1.5 million people. In fact, looking at the numbers, it appears that is about only half there were 2.9 million deportations undertaken during Obama's first term, and that number was also that Obama also had 1.9 million deportations under his second term. So I think it is important to remember the context that with the stats, at least the numbers Trump was doing before, that wasn't entirely unheard of. That it was happening with the preceding president.
It was a lot more with Obama.
Yeah. And I suppose then I would add, as a counterpoint to my caveat, that according to the Policy Institute, those numbers don't factor in the millions of people turned away at the border under the COVID policy. So, arguably, if you factor in those numbers, you would see, in terms of an overall rejection with the U.S., higher numbers. But again, I do think it is mindful, again, to keep in mind the stats under Obama as well as under Biden too. And I guess finally, I would say, in terms of, I've kept bringing up the matter of legal challenges to whatever the second term is going to bring from the Trump team. That while his plans do have a base of support with his supporters, and you see that with, for instance, his spokesperson. There was at least one spokesperson recently saying, because he won the popular vote. This clearly shows a mandate from the American people to follow through with what he said he was going to do. So I think, while yes, he does have an apparent base of support of people who want to see him go through with at least some of this, that at least we are getting word already from a lot of advocacy groups and legal experts who believe that things like the mass deportations and the travel bans are going to lead to human rights violations. They seem ready and able to litigate once again against these programs. And so, I do have a sense of optimism that at least in some number of jurisdictions that are maybe more opposed to these anticipated policies, that we will see some meaningful, substantial legal challenges and probably some meaningful wins in at least some areas. Yeah. So that does give me some reason for hope.
Thank you, Attorney Tim, for your time, bringing so much valuable information for the community. We appreciate that. I want to tell our viewers, if you have any questions, you can call the office. The number is on the screen, 508-573-3170. You're welcome to call if you'd like to schedule a consultation with an attorney. I tell all of our viewers all the time, do seek consultation with an attorney. There's a lot of speculations out there, a lot of bad information as well. People just throwing information out. You have to check that every case is different. Everyone has a different case from the other, so it's good to get the point of view of an attorney, legal counsel. It's the best way to go. Any final words, Attorney Tim, that you'd like to share?
I guess just thank you for having me on, and yeah, it's I've it's been, an absolute pleasure getting to do work on behalf of individuals who need this sort of support, and I'm eager to keep doing it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. And we'll see you guys again next week. Thank you.